Hello everyone, this video will show you the steps for carving a cube in wax, and the cube will be exactly 25 by 25 by 25. We are going to use a block of purple carving wax. There are other types of waxes for different purposes. We look at these for our creative wax carving project. Spiral saw blades. Instead of being flat, the blades have teeth that go around the blade in a spiral. They are designed to cut wax and plastics. You will load the saw blade in your saw frame the same way as for standard blades, with the teeth pointing down towards the handle. This is the vulcrylic file, a wax file, double-ended, half round. And this is the 3-in-1 file, also double-ended and half round but much wider. Very useful to file large surfaces. And of course, it is a precision exercise, so set square, dividers, and your fine tip scriber, and of course your calipers, and also a piece of sandpaper taped on your bench top or on your steel block, just for the finishing. That's the tools that we need for this exercise. Again, to insert the spiral saw blade in your saw frame, the technique is the same as for a standard saw blade. Check that the teeth are pointing down towards the handle. You can feel with your fingers. Tighten and make sure there is enough tension in your blade. It should make a nice ping, and that's it, ready to go. Now, this block looks quite smooth and crisp, but we can't assume it is perfectly square. So we need to actually check it with the set square. Since we just need a small piece for this project, I'm only going to check one corner of the block. It is okay for the most part, except for one side, which is uneven and needs to be filed. And it doesn't look square. I'm going to use the 3-in-1 file and the large flat file as well. It is very wide and great for filing large surfaces. So I'm going to brace the block against the bench pin and file in different directions. Let's speed up at this point. So it is a bit smoother, and let's work with the wide flat file. It doesn't have a handle because this way you can put it on your bench top, and it's quite flat and it works very well. You can check on your steel block as well, but really the best tool for checking that all sides are square or perpendicular to one another is the set square. So you see it's not a perpendicular square yet. There is a bit of light coming on the right hand side. So when I file, Now, to try to correct that, I'm going to focus mostly on the left side here. And then again, smoothing out on the large flat file. One nice little trick, when you drag your set square on the surface, you see that here there's a little bit of wax shavings that come up. That's obviously the high spots on the block. So this tells me that this is where I need to file. So it's a nice visual aid. Checking again with the set square, there's still a little bit of wax shavings. So it's still a little too high on the left, but better than it was. So now that I'm filing on the large flat file, I'm focusing on that edge. I know it's a little too high still and it needs to be brought down. Okay, so we've made the final adjustments with both the 3-in-1 and the large flat file, and now this is good. So we have a nice perpendicular corner here. For this next step, we are going to start scribing the shape of our cube. Just like with metal, there are different methods to do that. You can open up your dividers at 25 millimeters. You can also use a ruler and your scriber. And then you're going to make 2 or 3 marks on each side of the block. And again, the cube is going to be 25 by 25 by 25 millimeters. Now that we have 2 or 3 marks on each side, we are going to join these using the set square. Remember, everything has to be perfectly perpendicular. So whatever method you use, it needs to be precise, and you only draw one line to avoid confusions later. So we have a rectangular shape, not yet a cube. We are going to saw it and then get our cube later. Now we need to do some preparation before sawing. We're going to make a groove with the saw blade beside our scribed lines. So we lay the blade flat on the block just outside of the scribed line, and we make a slight groove parallel to the line. Leave about 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeters between the groove and the line. So that's what it looks like. These grooves will help us saw more precisely and on a straight line when we cut the shape later. So it is going to be very helpful. As you can see, the line, the scribe line, is still there because we're cutting just parallel to it, just outside of it, not on it. So these grooves will be our guidelines or lifelines, maybe. They will help us stay on track and straight when sewing. As you see, these saw blades, they are a little messy. They don't make a very clean cut. So this will be very useful. Okay, let's start sewing. Sew into the groove to sew on a straight line without sewing on your scribed line. Instead of sewing the whole length of the line, sew just a little bit and then flip the block of wax and sew from the opposite side. And continue like this until you reach the end of the line. And of course, check often to make sure you are still sewing into your groove. When you start your cut, the blade is on an angle, just following the groove, and then you bring it almost perpendicular to the surface of the block as you continue sewing. When you are close to the intersection of your two lines, you need to sew beyond the point where the two lines meet. You sew a few millimeters beyond that intersection. It will be easier to separate the shape from the block when it is cut out later. When you are finished, make sure you hold on to your shape. Don't drop it. It could break or get dented. And that's it. One more cut to do, and this will be our next step. Before we can sew the cube, we have to check that all the sides are perpendicular. Now we still need to do a little bit of filing, of course. The block is now just a little bit over 25 millimeters in width and almost 40 millimeters in length. We are going to set our dividers at 25 millimeters exactly. Double check that measurement. And we're going to make 2 or 3 marks on each side of the block, as before. And using the set square, we're going to join these marks and scribe a line at 25 millimeters from the top all around the block. Now one side is still rough, we will file it later. before sewing, we make the grooves as before to make it easier to sew in a straight line. And now we are ready to sew, to remove that little bit to make our square. As before, we keep flipping the block, rotating the block. So we sew a little bit on each side, rotate the block, keep sewing, making sure that the scribe lines remain visible. And then carefully we are going to remove the block. And now we have a cube. It needs to be filed to bring it to 25 millimeters exactly on each side. That's the next step. Before we start filing the cube, let's check that the sides, the 4 sides that are already filed, are perfectly perpendicular. Use your set square for that. These ones are correct. Let's check again. We need to make some adjustments for that one. At this point, it should be only minor adjustments because the filing has been done before. For this one, I use the vulcrylic file. Concentrating on the spot that needs to be corrected. And then the large flat file, putting more pressure on the high spots. Final check. And I like to put a mark on the side when it is done and correct, so I can keep track. So now we can start filing the 2 sides that we just sewed. You can see that the surface is very rough and uneven. So let's start filing. So keep rotating the block, file in different directions, check your measurements. And here we are, at this point we're at 25.5 millimeters, so we still need to remove about half a millimeter. Remember that if you file too aggressively and if you remove too much wax, if you lose your line, that's it. You cannot put the wax back on. So always check and make sure you keep these lines. They should remain visible until you reach the 25 millimeter mark. So we are now much closer to the required size. Some sides are right on 25 millimeters and some are slightly over. So some minor adjustments need to be made, and use your sandpaper to give your piece the surface a nice smooth finish. And the finished cube is 25 by 25 by 25 millimeters. With a nice smooth surface, crisp edges and corners. That's it. Thanks for watching.